Hello, my name is Jazlyn Hellman from the Joint Open Source Software Usability Lab between McGill University and Polytechnique Montreal, and I'll be presenting our work on characterizing user behaviors in open source software forums, an empirical study. Open source software is growing in popularity, and consequently, the user base is growing and diversifying. This makes identifying, accommodating, and fulfilling the needs of end users more of a challenge, especially when considering mass end users. Because of this, coupled with the fact that open source contributors prioritize functionality over usability, open source software tends to struggle with poor usability. We define usability as the attributes which determine ease, error prevention, efficiency, and pleasantness for an end user when interacting with the software. Successful usability, development, and maintenance of open source software requires frequent and direct communication between these different stakeholders, especially with end users. Forums are a popular communication channel for open source software, often with separate forums for development and users. However, despite the decades worth of research that's been conducted on open source software, we know very little about how end users engage and communicate with open source communities on these forums. Most open source forums that have been analyzed have been exclusively developer or technical forums. Little is known about what challenges hinder end users from continuous and meaningful participation in the open source software community. As a result, end users' expectations are seldom reflected in open source software development. Towards this end, we conducted an empirical study on 4 popular user forums to identify the challenges and opportunities for end user engagement and community building. Our research was guided by the following 2 research questions. First, what are the characteristics of the discussion threads? And second, how do the different roles in the user forums participate in terms of frequency of various activities, and how the contents of posts reflect key cognitive processes, emotions, motivations, and power dynamics. With an established characterization in terms of thread features, key roles and activities, and psychological processes of open source forum users, we will be able to identify opportunities to improve end user engagement and community building. Before applying our analysis methods, we identified our 4 forums through 4 criteria. 1, the open source software has an active user forum. 2, the software must have a GUI. 3, the open source software's project code base is on GitHub. And 4, the forums are primarily in English. Zotero is a popular reference management software used by a diverse set of end users. Audacity is a multi-track audio recorder and editing application. VLC is a cross-platform multimedia player. And RStudio is an IDE specifically designed to facilitate our programming. We used Scrapy to extract threads from all the forums from each forum's respective inception until October of 2021. Each thread had the textual content of each post, the poster username and user type, and the timestamp of the post. We collected a total of more than 280,000 threads with over 1.29 million posts made by more than 207,000 members. To answer research question 1 about the characteristics of the discussion threads, we focused our analysis on the progression of threads in the forums based on the length and lifespan of the thread. These 2 metrics are treated as a proxy for the complexity of thread topics and the responsiveness of the community. A consistent pattern in terms of thread length and user participation across the 4 forums was observed. The median length for threads was 3 posts, and the median number of users per thread was 2 users. We also found about half of all threads in our dataset across the 4 forums received no follow-up from the original author, indicating a potential abandonment by the original author. To inspect the responsiveness of the community, we first look at the median time for a response to a new thread. We analyzed the response time of threads with responses from users that were not the original authors and found that the median response time was over 10 hours. Zotero had the shortest response time of about 3, and VLC had the longest response time of just over 23 hours. Next, we analyzed the lifespan from first post to last post of a thread. We found the median thread lifespan to be just over 17 hours. Zotero again had the shortest lifespan. Our results for research question 1 indicate that discussions in open source user forums are short-lived, encompassing a small amount of information exchange among only a few community members. Next, to answer the first part of research question 2, we start by inspecting the roles of the users. We considered 3 roles of forum users: organizers, developers, and end users. Organizers are people managing, maintaining, and participating in the forum in an official capacity. Developers are users who also contribute code to GitHub. These we identified by matching forum usernames to GitHub usernames. And end users are everyone else. For all forums, most forum users were categorized as end users and very few as organizers and developers. This led to a high ratio of end user to non-end users. This ratio is a representation of the workload on the part of non-end users, given that end users are the ones that require the help of organizers and developers. Our analysis of participation focuses on user tenure in forums, identifying activities related to posting, and the frequency of each activity to understand overall communication patterns by the 3 user roles. Of all user groups, end users had the shortest tenures across the 4 forums. But it is worth noting that there was a variation in end user tenures. We identified 3 types of activities. A thread's post can be either an initial post, which is a post to start a thread, a reply by original poster, which is a follow-up post to a thread that the user initiated themselves, a reply by other, a response post to a thread that was initiated by a different user. About half of all posts were replies by others. End users made the most initial posts, and consequently, replies by the original poster in all forums. In terms of replies by others, you can see that the distributions are more varied and dependent on the forum. However, the overall high contribution of end users to the replies by others across all forums indicates a critical role this group plays in open source communities to provide feedback and support. Our final component of the empirical study on the analysis of post contents and was conducted using the linguistic inquiry and word count, referred to as LOOK. LOOK is a language analysis tool to help identify how word use reflects an individual's psychological state, emotions, and more. It works by calculating scores representing how present a psychological category is in the text. For our purpose, we selected 7 specific categories from the Look 2015 dictionary based on their relevance to the context of open source software user forums. We conducted statistical analysis to understand how different forum user roles demonstrated these linguistic features differently. We performed Kruskal-Wallis, followed by a pairwise post hoc test. Here we report only the most prominent results. For more details, please read our paper. First, we have Clout. This category is a non-dictionary category. An algorithm measures the amount of expertise and confidence a person possesses in their speech. A lower score is more tentative and humble. We found that across all forums, end users exhibited the lowest Clout scores than both organizers and developers, indicating lower confidence levels. Moving on to tone, we have another summary score, which uses the positive and negative tone dimensions to calculate the overall emotional tone of a text. We found that end users are more positive with respect to organizers and developers, but their median scores were still neutral in tone. Next, we have authenticity. Authenticity displays the degree to which the author of the text is disclosing and honest versus guarded or distant. Examining this category allowed us to look into how different groups disclose their issues and how this might reflect back in their communications. We found that end users were more open and honest than organizers and developers in all forums. Last, we have drives. This category is the degree to which a person's needs, motives, drives are mentioned in the text. In this category, end users were more motivated than the other groups across all forums as well. Moving on to our concluding remarks, we summarize some of the implications of our characterization of user behaviors in open source user forums. We found that all forums had a large end user base who initiated almost all threads in addition to replying to other users' posts. Moreover, their speech displayed positivity and openness in communication. This suggests that end users are a large body of enthusiastic, motivated people that could be an asset to open source software development in terms of usability and accessibility feedback. Next, we found that threads are usually short, and users are generally quite responsive to new posts, but often ignore or abandon older posts, including their own. Based on manual inspection of the forums, we speculate some potential reasons for this could have to do with the forum interface design for sorting and finding older threads, or a lack of proper guidance for end users on how to close threads. We suggest that further research is needed on end user onboarding into open source software communities. Our look analysis provides a foundation for identifying strategies to begin including end users within the open source software development process. In particular, the low Clout scores but higher tone, authentic, drives, and affect scores of end users when compared to developers and organizers indicated that the end users are more divulging, open, motivated, and positive in their communications despite lacking confidence. This is a promising indication that there are end users who would be interested in participating further in the OS development process, but might lack the confidence to do so. However, to truly support this inclusion, developers and organizers could work more to be welcoming and supportive of end users in their language, and more end users might be encouraged by this to participate. In terms of limitations, we selected our forums from a sampling of most downloaded open source softwares that was obtained by the Open Source Software Directory, and we focused on softwares we were already familiar with. Further, to identify developers, we made the assumption that if someone was a GitHub contributor, they would use the same user ID on the forum, and we cannot guarantee that our cross-reference matching is complete. In terms of future directions, we propose a qualitative analysis of a sample of forum discussions to help explain more of our insights. Finally, because our analysis here is based on observed behaviors in forums, and we acknowledge that not all end users of open source software are able to or wish to participate in forums, we propose future work through surveys and interviews with more diverse open source end users, especially those who might not be visible, but are equally important. This concludes our presentation on the empirical study to characterize forum threads. Thank you for attending the talk. Feel free to reach out if you have more thoughts or questions.